Welcome to A Little Nutrition Talk Radio, the podcast for health seekers who want to cut through the noise of nutrition, diet, and health confusion and take charge of their well-being. I'm your host, Susan Watson, registered dietitian and certified eating disorder specialist. As the founder of A Little Nutrition Inc., a multidisciplinary healthcare clinic, I believe that health is multifaceted, and that's why our team takes a collaborative approach to integrating both nutrition and mental health support across all stages of life. And we believe that health is so much more than the numbers on the scale. Our weight-neutral philosophy prioritizes providing inclusive care that empowers our clients to focus on what truly supports their well-being on their own terms. On this podcast, we're going to explore questions about health, nutrition, mental wellness, and offer a refreshing new perspective on taking care of yourself. It's not about striving for perfection. It's about discovering what works best for you. So you're in the right place. Grab a cup of tea, get comfy, and let's jump into today's conversation.
So hello, welcome everybody. I'm here with Kristy Rebenchuk, a therapist on our team. Hi Kristy, I'm so happy to have you here today.
Thanks.
And I'm really interested in the topic that we're going to be talking about today, which is why progress in therapy doesn't always feel good. And when I think about my own journey, I think that when I decided to meet with a therapist back in the day, I remember being really excited to start working on some issues that I had. But then after I started doing the work, I started to even question if it was even a really good idea. Like, why was I purposely putting myself through what felt really uncomfortable, hard, and even downright miserable at times? And I remember going like, maybe I would have been better off maybe not starting at all. But of course, now I see that this was really just part of the process, and I had to remind myself of the big picture and maybe my original why as to why I wanted to go to therapy and what I wanted to get out of it. But I remember it being, pretty rough and really disruptive to my life, but I think it was a needed disruption. So, I feel like it was good. And what was most surprising is that when I had started therapy, I had wanted to go for one issue. And as we're going through the work, kind of uncovered a different issue that I was totally blind to. So I get it. I understand what we're talking about today. I know it's hard, but I really would love to hear more from you, our therapist, about this topic. So maybe why don't we start with talking about how you would define progress, what it means, and what it kind of looks like when it talks about therapy or when we're thinking about therapy.
Sure. So, my first thought in terms of what progress means, and just as it is in the context of therapy, I would say that it's anything that's done differently, to be honest. And just that concept or that idea, that we've got, our entrenched ways, our entrenched habits or patterns of how we perhaps dealt with our life crises or problems or challenges. And, until we come to therapy, we might have not noticed, at least at the beginning, how it's not necessarily serving us in the way that we want. And yet it's something that we keep going to. So whether that's, our eating habits, whether that's substance use, whether that's, dissociating and just avoiding whatever our coping mechanism has been, and that again, at some point we realize, well, that's just not serving me anymore, or if it even has ever, that I would say that once we come to therapy and once we start to notice that, oh, I did that such and such, I tried blah, 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 whether it's the tools that you're learning, or it's just because through therapy, you're processing some of those root causes that you mentioned that allow us to not have the other reactions or perhaps impulsive kind of, draws that we've had in the past, and could rather maybe sit with it, or could rather maybe slow down a little bit and respond in a different way, or rather try, again, one of these new tools that we've been learning about. I would say that all of that for me would be under the umbrella of progress, that's when you can really see that it's unfolding in a way that's bringing more, insight, that's bringing a bit more awareness, that's allowing yourself to feel a bit more at ease, even if it is a challenging or distressing moment. I don't want to say it's easy, but again, for us to be able to do anything differently, especially when we've been doing something a certain way for so long, I would say that would be progress.
Oh yeah, that's a great definition. And again, I think the the issue was that it wasn't easy. And so when you put yourself in a difficult situation, things felt maybe artificially easy before. And then you put yourself, like, it's like you're ripping off a Band-Aid, right? And you're like, now we have to heal. It's like, let's just put the Band-Aid back on. But it's leaving it off, letting it heal, and then, kind of seeing what things are going to be like after. And it's not easy, but it is so worth it. I think that's the message I feel is like, when I was in that middle point being like, why am I doing this? I had to almost shut that off and be like, I'm doing this to get better. I'm doing this so that I have better ways to manage emotions in life, right? Like have to revisit why, and then just kind of remind yourself of that. And I don't even know if, it felt like there was progress because you're such in the middle of it all. But I think the fact is, you're not going backwards. Yeah. To just quit, right? It's like, okay, I'm sticking through this. It must be progress, even if it's maybe not. And that idea of just not doing things, or I guess it's doing things differently, right? It's like, well, I'm trying this. It's different. It's uncomfortable.
Yeah. And I think that for progress, it's just really, people expect sometimes things to happen really suddenly, but sometimes things are happening and we don't even know it. And so I think just the very act of showing up to therapy is progress, showing up and just being able to do that piece differently. Perhaps in the past, again, we would go into ourselves. We would just maybe vent to people that we had around us. We would, again, just use the coping mechanisms that were familiar to us. And just showing up, just getting in a car or logging on to a virtual session, whatever it might be, is doing something. It's doing something, and that is progress. And I think we also have to celebrate and give ourselves a lot of credit for even the littlest of change. And that, because the littlest of change leads to the massive shifts. And so, again, I just think that it's the little things. If you can just show up, that's progress.
Absolutely. It's much easier to be like, I want to cancel. Like, that's easy. It's a lot harder to be like, I'm going to show up today. Yeah. So I agree that that's progress. Why do you think people are surprised when progress in therapy feels uncomfortable or even painful?
Ooh, that's a big loaded question. Well, I think, again, my first thought with that is, a lot of us have done the best that we can, that we can throughout our lives in terms of coping, navigating, managing. And yet, we realize at some point, again, for whatever reason, it's not serving us. And so to come to a place of, kind of face to face with yourself, to say like, okay, you know what, maybe what I was doing wasn't helpful or at least sustainable. And I think in these moments, we have these, that unfamiliar, which I think is for a lot of us a big trigger, the uncertainty, the unfamiliar, the unknown. We all want to know that we're safe. We all want to know that we're happy. We all want to just have this really, if for lack of a better word, this kind of cocoon perhaps. And so when that's opened up, that can feel really unnerving. That can feel really, really obviously uncomfortable. And it's a different realm to be living in. And so I think for a lot of people, it gets really scary. It gets, perhaps again, these coping mechanisms have been the only thing people have felt has been consistent for them. And even if it's not serving them, well, the consistency itself is. And so to shake that up and to open up, a different realm towards a bit more uncertainty or the unknown can feel very unnerving, very unsettling. And I think that's where kind of for a lot of people, that's, the, point of perhaps reconsidering, is this what I want to do? Or do I fall into this? And do I trust? Do I trust not only myself to an extent, but do I trust this process to be able to essentially take care of me? And so I think that again, that uncertainty and that unknown can be that reason that we feel uncomfortable and what shows up. And perhaps even painful, because again, as you mentioned with your experience, that you might have gone to talk about this one thing and realized the root was completely different, or way deeper than perhaps you originally thought it would be. And I think for some people and clients that I've seen is, we know what we're feeling in the moment, and we know perhaps what triggered us in that moment, but we don't know what it's tied to. And so in therapy, it goes deeper, over time, and it, of course, at the pace that the person is ready, but it goes deeper to what is this tied to, and what's stuck in your body that's reliving this pain in these different kinds of experiences that you're having in your life. And so that itself also can be somewhat painful. But I would say, again, is the catalyst for opportunity. I don't like the word necessarily change, but for opportunity and transformation. Right. So if you can just stick with it to and allow yourself to trust in this process, and allow yourself to feel a sense of not necessarily comfort, but a sense of trust that you will be well protected and well supported. This can be a real big catalyst for bigger opportunities. So that discomfort, although painful, can be something really magical.
So what I'm hearing is it's kind of got to get a bit gritty to make change.
Yeah. And again, and that sounds really scary to people. Even saying it out loud, but it doesn't happen all at once. Again, we follow the comfort levels to the extent that the person communicates to us. We follow that comfort level. We follow that pace. We make sure that they're well, resourced, we call it, or have been, facilitated tools to manage whatever distress might come up in that. But again, it's that trust that there is a very set process that gets, opened up in this experience. And that, you as unique as you are, there is safety in this as well.
Yeah. I don't think I ever felt not safe. It was just more kind of why did I open up a can of worms that I wasn't expecting to? But, deep down I knew she'll probably deal with this, right?
Well, and the alternative is that you bury that and you just keep reliving that pain, that trigger over and over in different experiences of life. You will keep experiencing it until it's resolved. That's the interesting part of life, is that, it could show up with different people in different settings, but perhaps it's that underlying trigger, whether it's, I'm overwhelmed, whether it's I'm out of control. We call those negative beliefs in therapy. Whatever it is that's being triggered, you will keep experiencing that. So that's the alternative. You can just go out and keep experiencing it. Or, we can open that up in a safe way, in an evidence-based way that allows for healing and, just this opportunity to move forward and not have those triggers have any control over you anymore.
I think what was really concerning for me was when I was reading the research about unresolved issues and trauma, and that kind of burying everything to just, that's your coping mechanism, bury it, don't deal with it, don't think about it, but how that picks away at your health and puts you more at risk for chronic illness and other health concerns. And I was like, oh, you know what? I just want to make sure that I, from all this stuff that had happened in the past, that I'm not suppressing it. And it was more just trying to double check. And of course I was, because it didn't feel uncomfortable at the time, but who knows what that long-term health consequences could be by burying it. And so it had to get uncomfortable, but it's it's much more freeing now, and can show up and be more present as a mom and as a person in life. And maybe I've kind of given some examples here, but I just wanted to ask you if you can maybe share one example of what progress might actually look like in therapy, especially when it doesn't feel like things are getting better.
Okay, good question. So, I would say that when people come in and, they might express, I don't know what the point of this is. I don't know if things will ever get better. I've been through so much. I can't really see the other side of it. I would say that again, just going back to the kind of concept or definition, that the simple one of progress that I had, which is just like anything done differently. So let's say that you're seeing someone who, whether it's, a friend, let's say a friend, and, back, in prior visits, you might have, gotten each other kind of riled up about something or held on to past pain or whatever. And then you got together again since you've been going to therapy, and you realize that they were the same. Maybe they were just as annoying, or they said some things that, were, again, something that was a button that we had that they were pushing. And instead of having, perhaps whether it's a more impulsive reaction or an explosive reaction or whatever it might be, maybe you just thought, I'm out of here. I don't want to listen to this. Or maybe it's addressing something directly. I would say that that's a really good example of, again, just things working, just anything done differently. I've had clients who just never were able to feel their emotions and just people pleased and didn't bring, problems up, just always kind of got on with things for a very, very long time in their lives. And then all of a sudden they're using their voices and they're asserting themselves and they're setting boundaries. And they didn't even notice it was happening until I said, hey, wait a second. You kind of challenged that. You used your voice. And they're like, oh, I did. And I would say then that therein lies an example of progress, right? When perhaps things on top of that, in session, the therapist might measure where in terms of distress you're at, with numbers. And, that is one way, again, in session that we can say, well, how distressing is that to you now? When someone says you're stupid, how distressing is that to you now? And it might have been a 10 before because that was how you were raised, and you were raised to feel like you're wrong about everything. But now if that word comes up, and especially in your direction, you're just like, well, whatever. I know I'm not stupid. I'm at like a 2. Yeah. There's some progress, right? Things still happen perhaps as they did. It's you and from the inside that's able to experience it and feel it in a different way.
Yeah, that sounds kind of like, as you're working through things, it may not be like a flip of the switch, but your confidence in those situations and how you navigate those situations starts to increase over time, and you might not even know it. And I know as a dietitian working with clients with an eating disorder and recovery, we've noticed, what am I doing here? I've been doing all this work and not moving forward. And I can remind them, it's like, well, you weren't able to do this before, but now you can. It's like, oh, that's so small, but it's so big, right? So I think that confidence piece is so huge. Just a last question here before we wrap up here. What would you say to someone who feels worse after starting therapy and wonders if that means it's not working?
Yeah, I would say that, even though I'm going to challenge that a little bit. I would say even if it feels worse, it can't be worse than ignoring it. It's just that the ignoring part has become so normalized. And so, I would challenge that a little bit. And whether one agrees with me or not, that's okay. But I think, again, we get so used to our old ways. And so when we're starting to open things up, when we're starting to get to the root, when perhaps, yourself is starting to see, underlying kind of, longly ignored, feelings or memories, that they've always been there. They've always been held within you. They've always been, for lack of a better word, stuck in you. It's just they've been buried so long. So I would say it doesn't necessarily, or perhaps doesn't necessarily feel worse in therapy. It's just becoming more to the surface of what's always been there anyways. And I think that that's a really good sign that that's coming up, because then it can get out, right? Then it's not buried anymore. And just like you mentioned earlier, there's a really good book, if anybody hasn't heard of it, The Body Keeps Score. Oh, yeah. How our experiences and our emotions and, the things that happen to us in our lives get stored in our bodies, and how that, if undealt, how that manifests in terms of diseases or illness. And so, again, lot of science behind that. But again, that burying, it's allowed us to dissociate for a period of our lives. But feeling worse in therapy just means it's always been there. It's just coming out. And I like the word flush, we can flush that out. We can get that out of your system, and we can replace it with positive beliefs, positive experiences, positive feelings, positive sensations. And that's really what we want to come to. So if it feels worse, I can hear that, I can understand that. But again, coming back to trusting the process, trusting the experience, that this is what's needed to get it out. And the alternative is it being stuck inside of you, and which I would argue is worse, actually.
It is. It is. I don't know, when I hear people, but maybe in my personal life is like, I'm fine, I've just buried it, it's no big deal. I'm like, I think it comes back in ways that we don't necessarily know. And I think we're missing our potential in life, in our relationships, in just showing up in the world if we have kind of buried it, because it sneaks up and pops up in different ways, and then we push it back down. But Kristy, this has been so great chatting. I feel like we could probably talk about it more, but it's a great topic to realize that, yes, we have to almost have a bit of discomfort to address concerns, but the other side of it, personally, just speaking on the other side of it, it is 110 times better to have that flushed out of your system, as you said, and to really be able to navigate life with having that not being buried anymore. So thank you for this great conversation. For anybody who's listening today who would like to work with Kristy, you can head to our website, alittlenutrition.com, and hit book a consult. You can do a 50-minute consult with Kristy if you'd like, or you can book right away. And I know you would love to work with new people on this area as well.
Absolutely.
So thank you, Kristy, for having us, and we'll see you at the next episode.
Sounds good. Bye, everyone.
Thanks for joining me on A Little Nutrition Talk Radio. I hope today's conversations left you feeling informed, empowered, and ready to approach your health with confidence and self-compassion. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe so you never miss an update. And if you found value in our discussion, I'd love for you to leave a review. It helps others find the show and join in on these important conversations. For more support and resources, visit A Little Nutrition Inc. online at www.alittle.nutrition.com. You can also follow us on social media for more insights on intuitive eating, mental wellness, and evidence and lived experience-based healthcare. Until next time, take care, be kind to yourself, and remember, your health journey is yours to define. See you in the next episode.